They say every empire is born in blood, but Qin was born in betrayal. Before he became China's first emperor, Ying Zheng, then just a teenage prince, lived surrounded by marble pillars, golden dragons and polished lies. Behind every silk curtain, someone whispered. Behind every smile, someone schemed. But the darkest conspiracy didn't come from generals or foreign spies. It came from his own mother. Lady Zhao, the Queen Dowager, was once a political pawn, a beautiful mistress passed between men like a prized artifact. First, she belonged to Lu Buwei, the cunning merchant who rose to power as Chancellor of Qin. Then, to legitimize his influence, he gifted her to the king, who made her queen and bore her a son, Ying Zheng. But power never forgets its debts. Even after the king's death, Lu Buwei and Lady Zhao remained tangled, two lovers clinging to their secrets. Their affair continued in the shadows, feeding off lust, loneliness and control. But as Ying Zheng grew older, taller and more dangerous, they realized a truth more terrifying than any enemy. If the prince discovered their betrayal, their world would burn. So Lu Buwei devised a plan. He would erase his presence from Lady Zhao's bed, but not her desire. He needed a replacement. Someone disposable, forgettable, seductive. Enter Lao Ai, a nobody, a drifter. But infamous for one thing, an urban legend whispered in brothels and bathhouses alike. He was unusually gifted. Lu Buwei found him, trained him, polished him like a weapon. And at a lavish palace banquet, he let the queen catch a glimpse. It worked. Curiosity became obsession. Lust became leverage. And within weeks, Lao Ai had shaved his eyebrows, disguised himself as a eunuch, and walked into the royal inner court, not as a servant, but as the queen's secret consort. Every night, while the palace slept, they feasted on each other in silken shadows. Every morning, Lady Zhao smiled as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Inside the heart of Qin's empire, a false king was rising, one thrust at a time. And the real heir? Still too young to see the web tightening around his throat. They called him Lord Lao Ai. But he was no lord, no general, no noble. He was a shadow given flesh, a puppet with delusions of royalty. Behind the palace walls, the Queen Dowager's pleasure became Lao Ai's ladder. She gave him everything, silks, land, servants, even her trust. And he gave her 2 sons. Illegitimate, hidden, dangerous. To protect the scandal, she faked a divine vision, claiming the gods told her to retreat in seclusion to Yongqing, far from the capital, far from the king. There, in a gilded exile, Lao Ai and Lady Zhao built a hidden court. Their sons raised like princes. Their nights filled with wine, laughter, and ambition. But power is never satisfied. Lao Ai, once a nobody, began to act like royalty. He bought allies in the court, bribed guards, recruited disillusioned soldiers. And slowly, he began to dream. What if he wasn't just a consort? What if those 2 secret sons weren't bastards, but heirs? He played the game well. Forged alliances with eunuchs, scribes, and minor ministers. Used the Queen Dowager's seal to grant himself lands and command. The palace murmured. Whispers of strange visitors. Unusual orders. Lavish parties. But Ying Zheng, now a young king, remained silent. Watching. Listening. By age 21 he knew his court was infested. 3 forces ruled Qin. The king's party, loyal, disciplined, quiet. Lu Buwei's party, wealthy, strategic, fading. And the Queen Dowager's party, hungry, reckless, and steered by a man who wasn't even supposed to exist. Lao Ai didn't just want influence. He wanted the throne. His plan was simple. Wait until Ying Zheng died, by illness or perhaps by accident, and install one of his own sons as emperor. A bloodless coup. Or so he thought. But arrogance breeds blindness. At a feast in Yongqing, drunk on wine and self-delusion, Lao Ai crossed a line. He struck a nobleman during an argument and screamed, "I am the Queen Dowager's husband. Who dares defy me?" Word traveled fast. And in that moment, the shadows he ruled began to collapse. Because Ying Zheng wasn't just watching anymore. He was preparing to strike. It began with a whisper, and ended in a scream. When the king heard of Lao Ai's drunken outburst, his violence, his claim to the Queen Dowager, he didn't rage. He smiled. Because now he had what every ruler needs to crush a traitor. A confession shouted in arrogance before half the court. Ying Zheng summoned the nobleman Lao Ai had attacked, Yanji. And through trembling lips the truth came pouring out. The lies. The sons. The affair. The rebellion in waiting. The king said nothing. his face still, ice cold. But inside, a storm was building. He knew this wasn't just about lust. It was about power. And power must be seized, not shared. But Lao Ai wasn't blind. His spies, bought with gold and promised with titles, brought word of the king's awakening. Fear spread through Lao Ai's court like smoke through silk. Cornered, desperate, and drunk on illusion, he turned to the only person left who might still protect him. The Queen Dowager. His lover. His shield. Together they plotted a final gamble. If the king knew the truth, he would strike. So they had to strike first. Lao Ai forged an emergency decree using the queen's seal, claiming there was a sudden attack on the palace. He summoned nearby soldiers, townspeople, even farmers to defend the royal family. By dawn, the palace was surrounded. But they weren't guarding the queen. They were walking straight into her rebellion. Inside the palace, chaos reigned. Lao Ai's men stormed the halls. Guards were cut down. Doors broken. Screams echoed beneath the painted ceilings. The young king, still in Yongqing, stood calm as the storm closed in. And then he unleashed hell. Ying Zheng summoned his Shenyang guard, his personal elite. Silent, loyal, trained for moments like this. With them, he unleashed the Shuijin warriors, brutal men loyal only to the blood of Qin. No banners. No speeches. Just steel. As the rebel forces poured into the palace, they were met with death. Clean. Merciless. Swift. Then the king appeared. Standing atop the walls, his cloak billowing, his voice like a blade. Lao Ai is the traitor. He seeks to steal the crown. Kill him. Protect Qin. And with that, the purge began. The gates of Yongqing burned red. Swords clashed in the streets. Blood soaked the stone floors of the palace. And still, Lao Ai clung to his fantasy, that he could still win. But Qin was no longer a court of whispers. It was a war zone. Ying Zheng, only 21, moved with chilling precision. He wasn't just defending a crown. He was exterminating a threat. He issued a decree. 1,000,000 copper coins to whoever captured Lao Ai alive. 50,000 for each rebel slain. No rank. No titles. No mercy. Suddenly, palace workers grabbed kitchen knives. Street merchants took up pitchforks. Even eunuchs armed themselves with sticks and broken glass. The kingdom turned against the Queen Dowager's lover. Because survival now had a price tag. Lao Ai fled, slipping out the west gates into the hills. But his luck had died long before he did. General Xuan's cavalry, ghosts in the mist, surrounded him. They didn't speak. They didn't threaten. They chained him like an animal and dragged him back to face judgment. But Ying Zheng wasn't satisfied with one man's death. He wanted an example. Over 20 high-ranking officials connected to Lao Ai's plot were executed. Some were beheaded in public squares. Others strangled with silk cords, an honor reserved for nobles. Their families? Stripped of names. Exiled. Erased. Over 4,000 households tied to Lao Ai were uprooted and sent to the farthest corners of Qin. Men, women, children. Gone. But it was the king's next order that stunned the empire. He turned his wrath inward, toward the very woman who bore him. His own mother. Lady Zhao's betrayal had crossed a line. And for Ying Zheng, betrayal had only one cure. He ordered her sons by Lao Ai, infants, bludgeoned to death. Their tiny skulls crushed before they could speak their first words. The Queen Dowager herself was stripped of every title and privilege. Once the most powerful woman in Qin, she was locked away in a silent wing of Yongqing, her only company the ghosts of her own ambition. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty to the state comes before blood, before love, before mercy. And in that moment the boy became a king. Not just by title, but by ruthlessness. Because only one truth remained in Qin. Power must be earned in blood. The rebellion was crushed. The traitors silenced. The queen humiliated. And the palace, once full of songbirds and seduction, now echoed with emptiness. Ying Zheng stood victorious. But behind the polished jade mask of his face, a darker legacy had begun. The people feared him. The nobles obeyed him. But a question remained, would they ever love him? Among those who watched in stunned silence was a scholar, Mao Xiao. A man of ink, not blood. He had walked the empire. He had seen the rot of corruption, the chaos of rebellion. And he believed in justice. But justice, Mao thought, did not look like this. 2 infants beaten to death. A mother cast into darkness. Thousands punished for the sins of one. So, in the dead of winter, while others bowed their heads, Mao Xiao sat. He marched to the palace gates, dropped to the ground beneath a sky heavy with snow, and wept. Not silently. Not politely. He wailed. His voice cracked the air like a bell. The heavens are inverted. The court is diseased. The king slays his own blood. How shall the people believe in virtue? Ying Zheng's guards rushed to seize him. But Mao didn't run. He didn't beg. He welcomed death. Dragged before the king, Mao's face was swollen with frost and tears, but his voice didn't tremble. Boil me alive if you must. But remember, truth does not die in fire. You may silence one voice, but a tyrant can never silence memory. Ying Zheng stood. The hall was quiet. Even the braziers seemed to pause. The boy who had killed his own brothers stared down at the man who dared to defy him. And then he chose mercy. Mao Xiao was released. Not just spared, but elevated. He became Grand Tutor, advisor to the very king he had just condemned. What? Because Ying Zheng knew something most rulers forget. Swords win wars. But only wisdom can build an empire. This was his greatest lesson. He would rule with fear, but also with strategy. He would crush rebellion, but listen to those who wept. And from this paradox, mercy wrapped in iron, the emperor was born. The rebellion of Lao Ai was not just the fall of a traitor. It was the forging of Qin's first emperor. Because in the game of empires, love is weakness. But timing, strategy, and control. That is how you survive history's blade.